Hello everybody out in the VC and in YouTube land. It's Matt and I'm back with another Rolling Stones album review. Get to that in just a second. First of all, I don't know if I'll make a video between now and then, probably not, but if not, want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving. Hope you have a good time with lots to eat and friends and family and all that good stuff. And Black Friday Record Store Day for anybody that's going out to that the day after, or Black Friday stuff in general. Good luck on all that. I looked at the list. Wasn't too much that I really wanted. I saw a couple of things I wouldn't mind, but I don't really care whether I get them or not all that much. So I might swing by the record store on Friday. If they're there, they are. If not, it's no big deal. But anyway, like I said, Rolling Stones album review coming up here. I wanted to just make note, because I kind of do this every year on my Facebook. Not really talk into it too much because I did a video on it a few years ago or whatever. But today's November 22nd, which is obviously a significant date. Assassination of President Kennedy. We all know about that. Music-wise, it is also a pretty significant date. On that same day, November 22nd of 1963, certain band put this album out in England, which at this point they didn't really wouldn't be catch on in America for a few more months, but one of the great albums of all time. Always enjoy this album. So this came out on November 22nd of 1963. Another album, this really great album, had the unfortunate, this didn't really affect the Beatles sales over in England because that album went straight to #1 and all. This came out in America on November 22nd, 1963. Great album, and the timing probably hurt their sales a little bit because a lot of people weren't so in the mood for Christmas music probably with the events of this day. But one of the best, greatest Christmas albums ever, in my opinion. So you've got Darlene Love, the Ronettes, the Crystals, the Bobby Sox, and Phil Spector, and so forth. These still show up on the Christmas radio playlists here and there, but just a rockin' good early wall of sound girl group Christmas holiday Yuletide wonder and goodness, and swell album. It's a shame that it came out on that day because that probably hurt its sales a little bit, but it's a stone cold holiday classic in my opinion. And we're not done yet. We jump forward 5 years to 1968, and the best album in 1968, and in my opinion the second best album ever released, came out on November 22nd of 1968. And the second best album, and also one of the greatest albums ever released, came out on November 22nd, 1968. That would be the White Album by the Beatles. So, that's that with the November 22nd remembrance there. Let's move on to the Rolling Stones. And so, doing these in the order of release, and with that, we get to Between the Buttons, which came out on January 20th, 1967 in England, February 11th of the same year in the US of A. Got to #3 in England and got to #2 in the United States. And this, with the exception of Through the Past Darkly, a greatest hits compilation that came out, I believe, in 1969. I'd have to check the date, but I'm pretty sure it's 69 that came out. That's not a new album, that's just a hits compilation. But this would be the last, thankfully, as far as I know, the last time that the Rolling Stone albums differed in England and America, because it was a pain to keep up with all of that. Like I said before, just like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Kinks, and all that, those early albums, they had different track listings in America and England because the American record companies left tracks off and put singles on and tried to squeeze every penny they could out of snot-nosed American kids with extra pocket money that were hungry for the rock and roll. But so here is the British copy, which is nice. Got a laminated sleeve and nice bright colors. It's mono, not original, unfortunately. This, I think, is original. This is an American mono copy. Not as bright on the sleeve color, but same sleeve back and front on both. And the difference is, I think I wrote it down here somewhere, like 3 songs, but we will get to them. Basically, they had come out with this 45 double A side 45 of Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together, which got slapped onto the American version, and they bumped 2 of the British songs and put them on a subsequent album. So this was pretty much the end of Andrew Loog Oldham, their manager's relation with the band. I think he was still around a little bit on the next album up, Satanic Majesty's Request, but this is the last album that he produced, and this is kill the suspense right now. This album's going to get a 10. This is my absolute favorite Rolling Stones album. I think it's their peak, even though they did a lot of great things after this still. It's also in my top 10 albums of all time listing. I love this album. Probably a lot has to do with the fact that this is the Rolling Stones at their most English, which I've said before, they're kind of the least English sounding or feeling band of the British invasion and the English bands to come afterwards. It's also the most Beatley and Kinks sounding Rolling Stones album, though it also still sounds like the Rolling Stones. And I love the earlier albums, as you can see, because I gave them glowing reviews if you go back and watch the earlier reviews. But this is, they kind of did with Aftermath before this. We're moving that direction, but this is them moving more purely into pop and rock. And there's very little of the blues influence that the band started out with on this album. There's a little bit still, but not much. And so, one of my favorite covers, even though Brian Jones is looking pretty worse for the wear there. Sadly, he would be no more 2 years, just 2 short years from now. But still, a really good, neat cover, I always thought. I like how they have the title and the Rolling Stones down there in the little bitty thing. And they took this, I believe, they'd been in the studio recording all night, and they went out in a park somewhere in London and took this at like 5 in the morning. That's why they were all a little bit bleary-eyed and tired and so forth. Back's got a nice little funny poem and cartoon. The cartoon is written by Charlie Watts. I don't know if he did the poem part too or the rhymes there. I think he did, but I'm not positive on that. So, and like I said, the American version, same cover and back, which was not always the case on some of the earlier English and American Rolling Stones albums. So, this gives lie, as do the earlier Stones albums, to every once in a while you'll hear someone say that the Stones are just a singles band and really only need to worry about the singles until, say, Beggar's Banquet All On, which is totally inaccurate in my opinion, because there are a lot of great album tracks. There's filler and there's a lot of covers, some of them really good, incredibly good. Them and the Beatles probably did covers better than anybody, but there's some filler, but there's some really good album tracks on these earlier albums that weren't singles, that weren't the radio hits. And with this album, and it's just front to back gold. And so there really was not a hit as far as the British version goes. There wasn't a single, or I guess it got played on the radio in England back in 1967. I wasn't there, I didn't know. But on here you've got the Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together, which of course were hits. But let's start off, and I'm going to use the British album, run through the songs on that, and then I'll pick up the songs that are on the American album that are not on the British album. So, side 1 of the British starts with Yesterday's Paper, which is just a beautiful psych baroque bit of music, sort of a fuzz tone classic of music hall, just a great Nobody in the World. I love the backing vocals. Brian doesn't play a whole lot of guitar on this album, a little bit, but he's still a very active member of the band and contributing heavily. He's bringing in, as he started to do earlier on a couple albums before this, bringing in all sorts of weird and wild and exotic and wonderful instruments for, you know, for that time. So he plays vibraphone and marimba on this song. And this is just Who Wants Yesterday's Paper, Who Wants Yesterday's Girl, as if the typical Rolling Stones misogyny for the time. You know, Mick got his girl and moved on to the next one. Might be about Chrissy Shrimpton, who was his girlfriend at the time, and they were breaking up or already broken up by that time. But Yesterday's Paper, great opener, gets a 10 in my book. There's going to be a lot of 10s in this review. Second song, My Obsession, fuzz bass again, great piano in this. It's just Charlie just swings like a bastard on the drums on this song. It's another great little pop baroque masterpiece, gets a 10. Backstreet Girl, number 3, which is a folky waltz type of a song, kind of a slow waltz. This is about Mick's or Keith, whoever wrote it, slumming on the side with a little something something girl. Not nice as far as the sentiment probably, but sure is a lovely song. Backstreet Girl, it's a great one. Another 10. Connection, this is Keith singing a lot of lead on this. Mick and Keith both singing together, and Keith by himself. Again, great guitar riff. It's about drugs. It's about connecting with a person or a girl, probably both. Bada Bada, great background vocals again. This is one of their best albums for, as far as the Stones ever did, harmony and background and backup vocals, which they didn't do all that often past this point. So this is one of their showcases of that. So that gets a 10. Connection. And we move on to She Smiled Sweetly, which is just a great sort of funeral sounding organ. Love how the song sort of builds up and crescendos, sort of like Booker T and the MG's Time Is Tight, how the song just sort of slowly chugs and builds and builds and builds and crescendos and comes back down and builds again. This one sort of does that. Same model, follows that same model. It's about a reassuring girl when you're having a hard time, who's someone you can depend on. So a little bit of sweetness in there, and that gets a 10 again. You're getting tired of me saying 10 probably by now, but She Smiled Sweetly gets a 10. Can't help it, the songs on this album are just so good. And this is, you know, in a year of just great album overflow, 1967. This is one of the, definitely among that company, one of the great albums. Cool, Calm, Collected. It's the 6th song. Again, great bouncy bass line, great guitar, love the piano bits. Brian plays kazoo. It's maybe about America or a confident together girl, as far as I can tell, lyric wise. Love the sped up piano at the end with the harmonica. It reminds me, and I can't remember what the name of the song is, but the great Wonderwall album by George Harrison. And there's it's not Party Succumb, it's I can't remember off the top of my head, but it ends with the tack piano playing faster and faster and faster and speeding up till it all sort of crashes into this glorious finale. And this one sort of does that too. It doesn't so much end the song as it just sort of implodes under its own manic, wonderful weight of glorious sound. And so, no surprise, Cool, Calm, Collected gets a 10 in my book. And we go to side 2 because side 1 is over, and that'd be the sensible thing to do, so we'll do that. Side 2 starts with All Sold Out, which is, I guess, one of the few, don't get many of those, Mick or Keith being vulnerable, having been sold out by a girl. Could also be the band's treatment by the media in America, because they always sort of got a rougher ride than, say, the Beatles and stuff as far as acceptance. So it could be about that. It's, you know, maybe it's about something totally different than that. I don't know. A Girl So Strangled in the lyric is kind of a rough thing. That kind of previews or looks forward to darker lyrics to come in things like Midnight Rambler and stuff a few years down the road here. But All Sold Out is a good, nice little rocker, and it gets, guess what? It gets a 10. Okay, so now we go to second song on side 2, which is Please Go Home, and the blues influence returns here for the first time on this album. It's got a cool echo. This is Mick or Keith just being bothered by a girl who's a drag, or maybe just someone in general who's a drag. Anyway, it's got kind of a mimics somewhat the ending of Have You Seen Your Mother Baby Standing in the Shadow, which I'll get to that song momentarily. It's not on this album, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. Please Go Home, it's a good one. It's a solid 8 for Please Go Home. Who's Been Sleeping Here is the third song on a side 2, and it's a folky song, probably a little bit of Dylan influence. He influenced everyone else, so I'm sure he influenced the Rolling Stones as well. This is Mick being indignant about a girl who's running around on him, which it's usually, I'm sure, the other way around. Usually it's Mick running around on the girl. Guitars towards the end of this song are really cool. It's a nice folky song. I'm going to give it a 9, and I'm wondering, probably not, but maybe if these bands like Steel Eye Span and Fairport Convention were paying attention to this and taking a cue from this song. Probably they took their cue from Dylan and old English folk ballads more than this, but they were probably Rolling Stones fans too, because they were around at this time. Their first albums came out in 68 or 69, those bands. Anyway, on to song number 4, Complicated. Just a great blast of garage rock. Kind of sounds Yardbirdish. Girl who Mick's drawn to but just can't figure out. She's complicated. I've known some girls like that. Maybe you have too. If you have, leave a comment and tell me all about it. Anyway, Complicated gets a 10. Number 5, Miss Amanda Jones. Absolutely love this song. Should have been a single. Should have been a number 1 hit. I just love the churning guitars, the riff, the kind of little Bo Diddley-ish, just revolving and churning, and just great garage rock blast of rock and roll. And so that gets a 10. I remember that song being used in a forgotten film that was forgot the name of the film, but Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, it showed up in, which Some Kind of Wonderful was basically just Pretty in Pink with the roles reversed, having a rich girl and a poor guy instead of a rich guy and a poor girl. So anyway, one of those John Hughes movies that's sort of been swept under the rug and forgotten in the years since, but there's a scene where that song shows up. And anyway, who cares? Moving on. Something Happened to Me Yesterday ends the album. That is the 6th song. Trumpet, trombone, tuba, whistling, all courtesy of Brian Jones here. It's got an old music hall feel, shared vocal between Keith and Mick. Slightly pepperish, slightly psychedelic, slightly mindful of Dead End Street by the Kinks. About drugs, I guess, pretty much. Coded a little bit, but about that. It's a 10 to end the album. So we go on to the American album, and we had, like I said, Let's Spend the Night Together and Ruby Tuesday, and I wrote down, but I forgot, I think they left off All Sold Out and Who's Been Sleeping Here off the American album. No, that's not right. I don't know. They left 2 songs off the British album on the American album, and I had it written down somewhere else, and I don't want to sit here and look through the album cover to bore you. Anyway, Ruby Tuesday was the song that really made me fall in love with the Rolling Stones. I probably heard it when I was a little kid because it was a hit on the radio and got to be number 1. But damn thing froze. Anyway, it's my absolute favorite Rolling Stones song, and written by Richards and Mick, but really probably written by Keith and Brian Jones. Got to number one in the United States, only got to number three in the UK, and everything about that song, just the recorder, the piano, the singing, the choruses, the verses, Charlie's drumming. It's a solid 10 all the way. My favorite Rolling Stones song of all time. Let's Spend the Night Together, surprisingly, is my second favorite Rolling Stones song of all time. Controversial song for its time. I wish that was still the bar of controversy today instead of what we got with all this F this, F that music crap today lyrics. But anyway, just a great song. They got in trouble on Ed Sullivan for, they're supposed to sing Let's Spend Some Time Together, and I think Mick either didn't or rolled his eyes, and Ed wasn't too happy about that. Anyway, this got to number 3 in the UK. It only got to number 55 in America because radio stations were wary of playing it because of the controversial sentiment, I guess. David Bowie did a cover of this. It's not too great. And I love David Bowie, but I was never that impressed with it. But the Rolling Stones original version gets a 10, and so this album, both versions get a 10 overall from me. And now, I don't know if this is going to show up because the stupid video thing on this computer froze. I bought a brand new computer several months ago, and you would think that it would work better than the old one, but apparently it doesn't. So the other one I'm going to review, as long as I've got you guys here, is Flowers. This album came out June 26, 1967, was only an American release, and it got to number 3 in America. And this collects songs from that were not on the American Between the Buttons and Aftermath, and some other just sort of leftover songs that had gotten released in England but not in America. And I think it has a couple of songs actually that had not been released in England at that time even. So most of this is stuff that's Ruby Tuesday is funny because the kids in America bought in February Between the Buttons, they got Ruby Tuesday and Let's Spend the Night Together, and here just 5 months later they get this album with the same 2 songs on it. It's got Lady Jane, which was on Aftermath, Have You Seen Your Mother Baby, Standing in the Shadow, which had been a 45, released right around before the time of Between the Buttons, non-album track. Just got to number 5 in England and number 9 in the US. Have You Seen Your Mother is just a sort of a, well, it's just greatness. I mean, it's just a volcanic pop explosion of fuzz and garage rock wonder, and it love the guitar ending, and it sort of marks the end of the Rolling Stones first period, I think, because after this and Between the Buttons they go in a little bit different direction on the next album, and then we'll get into that. Things don't exactly work out, so they go in yet another direction on the album after that, and then Brian dies a couple of years later and they go in yet another direction. So, but anyway, Have You Seen Your Mother, Standing in the Shadows is obviously a 10. The other song on here is My Girl, which is the Temptations song. You all know that. It got to number 1 by the Temptations. I think it was the first Motown number 1 record, if I'm not mistaken. Great song in the Temptations' hands. Here with the Rolling Stones, it is probably their worst song of the 60s. It's a cover, I know that, but it's just uninspired. They just phone it in and run through it. It's pretty awful, truth be told. They really don't even try. This is the very definition of mailed in, and I don't know where this was originally supposed to go, maybe on Aftermath or December's Children or something. It dates back to, I think, 1965. I'm not positive on that because I should have wrote that down and didn't. But they did a lot of great covers. This definitely wasn't one of them. This must have been, they were just messing around in the studio and decided to run through that song because it was current on the radio at the time, or they needed another track for an album and thought, hey, let's just grab My Girl and do that, and they just shot through it. It's terrible. Like I said, this is well, one of the worst songs they've ever done. Even though I would rate something like Angie or Hot Stuff maybe worse, because there they were at least trying to do a song that just turned out to be awful. On this one, I don't think they're even trying. I think they just needed an extra song and said, hey, let's do My Girl real quick. But it's awful. My Girl gets a 1 from me. But things get better. There's 2 more songs. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all these songs because most of them were on other albums I've already talked about. Ride On Baby is a 1965 track. Chris Farlow did that. He did Baby You're Out of Time. It was written by Mick and Keith, but they gave it to Chris to do. And then they did it too. It's about a girl who's cute on the outside and rotten on the inside. And I've met a few of those too. I'm not sure if or when this was released in England, Ride On Baby. I'm sure it's shown up on a compilation or something since then. But it's a good, solid 1965 Rolling Stones rocker, and it gets a 10 from me. And the last one is Sitting on a Fence. Never understand some of the sick things that a girl does to a man. I hear you, Mick. I've been there too. Charlie plays tambourine on this. Harpsichord and acoustic guitar, Brian Jones. It's just a great song. It's sort of Ray Davies would do this stuff a little bit better. The theme of this with things like Shangri-La on the Arthur album, and some of the songs on Face to Face and so forth. But Ray Davies is a better songwriter than Mick or Keith, so that's no surprise. But this is still great. This is still 10, Sitting on a Fence. This ended up coming out on More Hot Rocks in America, and I think More Hot Rocks was a release in England too. So anyway, yeah, Flowers, even though it's got some stuff, if you were in America at the time, this would have been pretty much new to you, with the exception of Ruby Tuesday and Spend the Night Together, and I guess Mother's Little Helper. But a lot of this stuff had not been released on American albums at the time, and it's got a kind of goofy cover, but it's 1967, and it's Summer of Love coming up and psychedelia and all that, so it fits in with the times, and it's not that bad of a cover. It's sort of not a whole lot to it, but it's a solid album. I would give it a 10, but because of the My Girl train wreck, I'm going to give it a 9.8, because everything else on here is pretty solid. And there, if you're really curious as to what else is on there that I didn't talk to, you can peruse at your leisure. So 10 for Between the Buttons, 9.8 for Flowers, and I will be back with Satanic Majesties here, but not today. I'm gonna watch movies. So have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Eat lots of turkey and dressing, and have fun with your family and friends. Take care.